Hello, my name is Eric Weiger. I'm going to be talking to you today about metacognition and reflective thinking. So here we go. I want you to look at this photo of my son. He's a cute little kid, isn't he? And we're going to imagine that this photograph represents a thought. The thought is well conceived, it's well focused, it's a fun picture, and we can't see all the actions that have gone into taking this photograph. So let's look at a second photograph. And this is a photograph taken at the exact same moment in time from a different angle, from my iPhone. And we can see the process that's going into the photograph. We can see my wife holding my son's hand, the photographer, checking her camera and checking her focus, and my son paying attention to who knows what. And this photograph, the second one, really represents what metacognition is all about. The photo behind the photo, the thinking behind the thinking. So what is metacognition? And this is from one of the handouts that Dr. Grant provided. And metacognition is one's ability to use prior knowledge to plan a strategy for approaching a learning task, take necessary steps to problem solve, reflect on and evaluate results, and modify one's approach as needed. It helps learners choose the right cognitive tool for the task and plays a critical role in successful learning. Another definition. This is from Seraphim Philkopf, Kopf, and Valen. And it's interpreted as thinking about thinking and involves both awareness and controls of one cognitive processes. National Research Council defines metacognition as a process of reflecting on and directing one's own thinking. And reflecting on is a very important concept here to remember. The experiences are any conscious cognitive or affective experiences that accompany and pertain to any intellectual enterprise. An example would be the sudden feeling that you do not understand something another person just said. And this is from Flavel, which is one of the first people who really came up with the word metacognition, started using it back in the 70s. So we're going to stick with him for a little bit. And Flavel breaks down cognition into 4 sub-areas, and that's metacognitive knowledge, experiences, goals, and actions. And we're going to focus on knowledge and experiences. And we're going to look at it in 2 ways. Well, we're going to look at the knowledge and experiences side by side. And metacognitive knowledge is knowledge about what factors or variables act and interact in what ways to affect the course and outcomes of cognitive enterprises. And these can be broken down into person, task, and strategy. So these are what your brain is actually processing, and the strategies that your brain is going to use. The metacognitive experiences are when the thinking individual is thinking about their thinking, or they're understanding their approach to a problem. And the metacognitive experiences are what create new metacognitive knowledge in a brain. So establishing or revising goals, adding to the individual's metacognitive knowledge, or activation of cognitive or metacognitive strategies. So why is this all important? Metacognition, that's a hard word to say sometimes, is especially important because it affects acquisition, comprehension, retention, and application of what is learned, in addition to affecting learning efficiency, critical thinking, and problem solving. Metacognitive awareness enables control or self-regulation over thinking and learning processes and products. And several of the research that I've looked at really link self-regulation and metacognition. They're almost used interchangeably in some of the research. Individuals who demonstrate a wide variety of metacognitive skills perform better on exams and complete work more efficiently. They use the right tool for the job, and they modify learning strategies as needed, identifying blocks to learning and changing tools or strategies to ensure goal attainment. And this is what we're going to say is that self-reliant learner. And so look at this one. Using the right tool for the job, using the right cognitive tool for the job, that's very important. We have self-sufficient, self-reflecting, self-sustaining learners with this, people who have a high sense of metacognition. So why is this important again? Self-regulation refers to evaluating what you currently know and determining what you still need to learn. Self-regulated learners take responsibility for their own learning progress and adapt their learning strategies to meet task demands. And this self-regulation, this component requires reflection, and this is where the reflective part comes into the fold. And we're gonna get to reflecting here in a couple minutes. But the three phases of metacognitive process, and this is from several sources. There's planning, monitoring, and evaluating. And each of these three phases can be built into lessons and modeled by teachers. So planning, if you're giving a student a task, they need to ask themselves, or they can ask themselves, what am I supposed to learn? What prior knowledge will help me with this task? What should I do first? What should I look for in this reading? How much time do I have to complete this, and in what direction do I want my thinking to take me? And as we'll see a little bit later, teachers can really focus their students on these tasks. Asking a student when you're giving them a reading, what do you want to learn out of this? If you're teaching math, you're doing multiplication, you can ask your students, what do you think is going to be able to help you complete the multiplication problems? And eventually, through repetition and through reinforcement, the students will eventually be able to do all these steps on their own. We want that self-regulated learner that's on this slide. So the next stage is monitoring. And the monitoring stage is kind of like the safety check during the process. And it's where the student asks, how am I doing while they're doing the task? Am I on the right track? How should I proceed? What information is important to remember? Should I move in a different direction? Should I adjust the pace because of the difficulty? And what can I do if I don't understand? I like focusing in on this one right here. Should I move in a different direction? And this is kind of, this is almost a reflective statement. This is almost a reflective statement in that they're truly thinking about what they're doing while they're doing it and evaluating the efficacy of what they're doing. And I like to focus in on that one, especially I'm a music teacher. So if students are trying to play a scale and they play the wrong note, hopefully I've taught them well enough to think on their own, but wait a second, should I try a different note because it didn't sound right? Evaluation, and this is after the task is done, after the learning task is done. And this is, it's also reflection. How well did I do? What did I learn? Did I get the results I expected? What could I have done differently? Can I apply this way of thinking to other problems or other situations? Is there anything I don't understand, any gaps in my knowledge? Do I need to go back through the task to fill in any gaps in understanding? How well might I apply this line of thinking to other problems? And the first slide, the first reflective slide, I think is a little bit easier for younger students to appreciate. How well did I do? Well, students get a grade. They can easily see how well they did. What did they learn? That might be a little bit more complex for some students to figure out. What exactly did they learn? Did I get the results that I expected? That's still a further skill to know. This slide really focuses in on, I think, a little bit older students, but I would love to be able to find a way to integrate these kind of statements with younger students too. Particularly, are there any gaps in my knowledge? I love asking questions like that. What do you think you don't know? I know it's a horribly worded sentence, a horribly improper grammar, but are there any gaps in my knowledge? It's very important for students to be able to figure that out. Metacognition and reflection. So as we just discovered, reflection is an essential component to developing metacognitive awareness. Reflection needs to focus not only on areas of strength or knowledge, but on areas of weakness. So once again, asking, what don't I know? And, interesting quote here, evidence has shown that weaknesses are less considered when reflections are read or assessed by a tutor, as students tend to demonstrate knowledge and hide ignorance. Students are too proud sometimes to admit what they don't know. And I think it's, as a teacher, that's definitely something that you can model. When you don't know something, admit it and tell the students, I don't know. Here's another quote about reflection. Programs aimed at increasing metacognition, such as critical reflection, can enable students to improve self-perceptions of knowledge and skills. So, There are 3 steps in effective reflection, and that is awareness, so identifying something kind of out of the ordinary in the experience which causes us to begin reflecting. Critical analysis, taking a step back and figuring out exactly what's going on. It's very important to be able to do that. And the new perspectives phase, and that is moving from the detached observer phase to becoming more involved. And that's trying to think of, how to integrate the out of the ordinary experience into their learning, into their lives, and make it not out of the ordinary. So there are plenty of ways that we can encourage reflection in our students and use it in our classroom. Portfolios, which, on its surface, just collecting student work doesn't seem like something that can be used as a reflective tool. However, an essential part of a portfolio is self-reflection, is looking at the strengths, looking at the weaknesses, looking at ways that we can improve, different directions we can take. Reflective narratives, which also, as I say on the slide, fit nicely into the Common Core standards. Narrative writing is a huge part of English standards now, and having students describe their experiences with whatever they were learning is a very powerful tool. Small or large group discussion, just simply talking about what happened, what students did, what they're talking about, what they read, what they listened to, what they heard, what they saw. In a small group can be disarming. Even in a large group, to some degree, can be disarming too. Journaling, writing a diary, or blogging, once again, kind of fits in the reflective narrative, but I like the addition of potentially doing it using some technology. And constructive critique of peer and self-work product. That kind of goes also with the portfolio. You can have students evaluate each other's portfolios or their own portfolios. Teaching metacognition. So when we're trying to teach our students to learn how to think and to think about their thinking, it's very important that the teachers not do the thinking for the students. So, the quote reads, instructors should take care not to do the thinking for learners or tell them what to do, because this runs the risk of making students experts at seeking help rather than experts at thinking about directing their own learning. We're teaching our students to become reliant, not self-sufficient. So there's an example of how to teach a metacognitive process, and that this is a series of steps teaching decision making in students. So when we're trying to teach students how to make correct choices, we want to ask them to clarify task assignments, analyze assigned tasks and instructions for clues on what correct procedure to use, consider procedures that have been used to accomplish similar tasks, consider the relative merits of alternative procedures, tentatively select a procedure, reevaluate the tentatively selected procedure, decide on a procedure to test, and then you also want to let the students know that, hey, they might fail. One interesting thing that I noticed when I was doing my research is a lot of these posters right here, and these are thinking stems. And surprisingly enough, these were used in, I think this is a 2nd grade classroom, and it's questions that the students can ask themselves while they're reading. I'm thinking, I'm wondering, I'm noticing, I'm picturing. It reminds me of, I'm figuring out, I just learned. And these can help the students try to figure out what they're thinking about while they're reading, or while they're listening to music, or while they're watching a movie. Common Core, understanding metacognition and reflection are key points in teaching students within Common Core standards. Increased rigor will require that students understand self-regulated learning and appreciating what they know and what they don't know in a subject. And there's a bunch of standards here that particularly link to metacognition and reflection, demonstrating independence, building strong content knowledge, comprehend as well as critique, value evidence, use technology and digital media, respond to demands of the audience, come to understand perspectives and cultures. One final point I wanted to kind of link is that Ed Lisk, who's a music teacher, linked metacognition to the interpersonal multiple intelligence, which I think is really cool. And I go through all the interesting little musical connections here. This presentation will be linked on the website on Sakai, and I'm going to leave you with this little picture for the next couple seconds because I think it's awesome. If thinking of thinking is called metacognition, then what is thinking of metacognition called? Thank you.